Hello, welcome back to Sport a Lot, coming to you from the United States at the World Cup with
Tariq Panja in Los Angeles.
That's Tariq Panja from the New York Times. Martyn Ziegler from the Times of London in Miami.
Rob Harris from Sky News here in Dallas. And we waited till we had a full attendance for the podcast to be able to do, rather than just having two of us and telling you it was actually three.
That sounds like a bit like some of the sort of crowd figures we've been receiving. Official attendance perhaps not quite matching what appears to be the number of empty seats.
People who used to follow Arsenal will be familiar with that.
Attendance given rather than perhaps the attendance in the stadium itself. Although even without that, getting big numbers into lunchtime kickoffs for World Cup games is still an achievement. But it has created further conversation because people can see these empty seats and it's not aligning with the numbers given.
Yeah, I mean, there are some reasons around it. I mean, for example, I was in the Miami stadium and there were initially thousands of empty seats. But that was due to people arriving late for various reasons, and it did fill up quite a lot by half time. But FIFA still said that there were 1,700 empty seats in the stadium, which is a big stadium, not the biggest match, 65,000 seats. But I'd looked before the match to see how many tickets were available on FIFA's official website. And there were only 7 tickets. Doesn't quite. So I think this plays into this suggestion, which hasn't been confirmed or denied by FIFA, that they've basically dumped a load of unsold tickets for the less popular games on secondary websites to try and sell them a bit cheaper, and then they don't face compensation claims from those who'd paid full buck for, because they were talking, the tickets available were $450, the cheapest.
Yeah, which is exactly what happened in the Club World Cup, the compensation claims. So, this is what people have been saying, and perhaps what we're seeing. But one thing, guys, these stadiums are absolutely enormous, and the attendance figures are really good. Yes, they're not full, but these are enormous stadiums. Some of these games, like on paper at least, aren't massive. So they are incredibly well populated for what they are. However, arguably they should be full if the prices had been lower, because people are loving going to the World Cup. And I guess this is the trade-off FIFA has made. Let's get as much money as possible and face the consequences of maybe some empty seats. And that's the calculation. And maybe that's some of what we're seeing. It would have been great if tickets were cheaper, available to more people, and every seat was full, of course. And Rob, we've seen this, haven't we? This video from FIFA, the volunteers cheering, saying, "Off you go! You get to populate the seats." So we're seeing that as well. So the volunteers being given access to these empty seats.
Pretty successful. We've gone 3 minutes and haven't mentioned Gianni Infantino's name. We'll get to him in a bit, because I did ask him about ticketing in Mexico City before the opening game. It was full in the Aztec Stadium. We were all there, all three of us, to see the absolutely packed feeling, the city celebrating. Although it was quite a crowd that you wrote particularly. Was it the aristocracy or something going out to
Yes.
watch the game?
Yeah, so this was our first opportunity to look at what a World Cup crowd looks like at these record prices. And in Mexico City for the opener, it was very, very much the well-heeled. I spoke to one guy and he said, "No, this isn't the real Mexico." I said, "Who are we seeing here?" And he said, "I've already seen 10 politicians walk through." So that's the class. I bet they didn't pay for their tickets, mind you. But that's the sort of people. I think there's a phrase Mexicans use for that class of society. It's called, in Spanish, fresas, or strawberries. I'm not sure what the reasoning for that is, but there were many, many strawberries in that stadium that day. Ticket prices at $3,000. A guy paid $10,000 for $2 US. That is well out of the reach of the average person.
So this is interesting. We have spent quite a bit of time already to start this pod discussing the issues around this cup. But there is a narrative online saying that this World Cup isn't getting the same scrutiny as Qatar, South Africa, others, and the fact almost like the US in particular is getting an easy ride. as the dominant host, despite all the political issues. I don't know what the perception is, because the reality is, to all of us, the coverage has been dominated by this for months, let alone the last week. The Trump impact, what's happening to visas, Iran, people not being let in, how welcoming the country is at all for the World Cup, and how countries normally want to show off their best side, and yet, like someone said, the US is showing its sort of tougher side to this World Cup.
I rate it being the most tortuous and painful build-up to World Cup that I could remember, and I think that is true. I mean, Qatar had a lot of controversies around it, but it wasn't this sort of, every week over the last 6 months. It seemed there's been something else arising, some sort of controversy or some sort of issue. A lot created around Iran, of course, and the war there. But so I think there has been a lot of inspection of what's happening in the USA. Totally,
A huge amount. I think we're also in a time where people are looking just to confirm their own biases one way or the other in the kind of social media age. But it reminds me, in around 2016, there was a program on the BBC called Bellamy's People. It was a sketch show, and it's still on YouTube. And it was a skit. There was a clip or a scene in this thing where a guy does a phone in, and he goes, people like me, you'll never have me on the radio. You never put a man like me on the radio. And the host is saying, you're on the radio right now. And this is the type of complaint. It just reminds me of this. People are, even if it's clear right in front of their own eyes that there is criticism, you say, well, you never said this about Qatar or Russia or South Africa. We're literally doing it in real time right now in front of you. And those are replies to the sort of stories that we're talking about. Ziggs, you might have written something, Rob, you might have broadcast something, put the clip up and said, well, why didn't you don't say this about the US? You're literally saying it right now.
And we have spent the last year or so very often on this podcast talking about American issues and whether it's violence, unrest, and even us actually reflecting, I would say a year ago, it wasn't getting that much attention, but we were mentioning it at the very least. And this build-up has been dominated by so many questioning how welcoming America is. Obviously, the US presents it as protecting its borders and keeping out people it doesn't want in the country and about safety. And it has run into this collision with just what do the FIFA tournament requirements say? And how in the past they could put pressure on host countries, now presenting themselves as completely powerless. And, we think back even to Brazil, wasn't it, forcing alcohol to be sold by putting pressure on the countries. And ultimately, FIFA could use its power and say, this is what you agreed. If you want the World Cup, you have to agree to this or we're out. Or is it actually more democratic for FIFA to listen to the government of a country that has been democratically elected? And how often in the past have we criticised FIFA for making demands on a country and seeing itself as bigger than a government?
There has been obviously lots of issues around visas being rejected for lots of fans from various countries for various reasons. Of course, I mean, I think everybody knows, I don't have to go into too much about the Somalian referee, Omar Artan, who refused entry, and some football officials as well. So we have looked at this in detail. There's been a lot of inquiries going on.
And behind the scenes as well, we've seen some of those political tensions in world football, because UEFA handed Omar Artan the Super Cup after he was denied entry to referee at the World Cup. I wonder how that went down at FIFA. It was very much upstaging FIFA, wasn't it? The last word being from Alexander Shevrin.
Classic. I mean, you could have taken that to the bank as soon as this guy was banned, that there would have been something like that from UEFA, to be honest. But there you go. I mean, great for him. Great for this guy to have his moment. And there you have I guess also a chance for one-upmanship in the world of football politics. And, obviously then after that, Alexander Shevrin has been in the news, hasn't he? Guys, that also is interesting. Should we talk about that a little bit and maybe how that story came about?
Yeah, so there were, I think, 11 national associations from Africa and the Caribbean put out a joint communique criticising Alexander Shevrin for saying that some of the matches were going to be uninteresting. He was basically been talking about the expanded World Cup. Although he said it was a big deal for the smaller nations who'd got in, that this word uninteresting was led to this statement criticising him, saying how much it meant to them, etc., etc., etc. The slightly surprising thing was that this statement was being reported in Slovenia, but nowhere else in the world. So I don't know how they'd seen it, because it hadn't been reported in the wider media. It's almost as though it had been sort of presented to them.
It certainly had not spread in English. And when this statement came out, I first saw it published by the South African Football Association. It referenced Shevrin calling these extra matches at the World Cup because of expansion from 32 to 48 teams uninteresting. It was a really partial quote, just one word in the whole thing, a much longer rebuke of Shevrin. And the only way I could find it was digging out the Slovenian for uninteresting and then putting it in various searches to try to find some Slovenian language coverage. It had not spread at all. Obviously, in World Football, there will be cutting services, so everything sort of feeds back. But it had been said almost a week earlier, but it was put out just before kickoff, before Curaçao's World Cup debut against Germany.
Mm-hmm. Well, call me cynical, but I can't. I've got to put the two stories together: the Artam UEFA statement and the privilege he's been given to referee the Super Cup, and this. I just can't help but thinking some people had their noses put out of joint as UEFA managed to get the moral high ground, and less of what he said here, but just the way it's come out. As you said, it's so hard to find the way it spread so fast. There's interest there who'd like to knock him down a bit, and there you go. And I think that is what's happened. And then another part of this as well, the third part from a media point of view. Again, there's a level of laziness, and it really isn't good for our industry, to be honest, where we have people briefing that he's denying having said it, but anonymously, when he clearly had said what he said. Now, I have no view on what that's his view, whether he thinks it's interesting or uninteresting or a bigger. He probably has a bigger thought, and he's right to have bigger thoughts on this. It's great he has big thoughts on this. He's a football leader. And if he finds World Cup expansion not great from a technical perspective, there'll be millions of people nodding their head who agree with him, and other millions shaking their head saying that's not right. It gives people opportunity. But he has said it. So anonymously briefing that he didn't, and then people running with that, it doesn't do our industry any good at all.
Yes, he did use the word uninteresting, but also Shevrin said, on the other hand, even small countries can participate and feel the pulse of the World Cup, which is a big deal. So he did acknowledge what it means to the small countries while setting out why there is an issue with these extra matches. And of course, we have heard Shevrin a few weeks ago, if you listen back on the pod, on Austrian TV, being critical of ticket prices. So that won't have gone down well at FIFA either.
No. Yeah, I think this is UEFA and FIFA exchanging shots in a way which has actually been going on for years, actually decades. And this is just another of those things. It's it's the battle for power and money, which is a big thing, and it creates these tensions.
And what would have helped the case of the newcomers is the fact Cape Verde on their World Cup debut did get that draw with Spain, 0-0. One of the favourites. They got the point off.
Yeah, and these things happen at World Cups. We all remember the Argentina's opening game in Qatar 3.5 years ago. That World Cup, of course, was in winter, losing to Saudi Arabia and then going on to win the World Cup. These things happen, and Cape Verde also give us a story, create new heroes. The number of Instagram followers, their 40-year-old goalkeeper managed to get after his incredible performance from like maybe a couple of thousand to a couple of million, I understand, as we're recording this. New heroes are created in these storylines. But if he wants to make that point, it's a fair point. If people have talked about quality, and I guess by the end of the tournament we'll know. But I don't know. I think people are blowing his comments out of proportion for other reasons. It's you don't have to agree with him, but it's great. I think that football people are talking. These are discussions we should be having.
And people are talking about football at times across the United States when it isn't the New York Knicks winning their first NBA championship since 1973. We've not heard Donald Trump talk much about the World Cup so far, just main post after the Americans started with a win. I was there in Los Angeles to see that, quite a big moment against Paraguay. He seemed more focused on the UFC event on the White House lawn to celebrate his 80th birthday on Sunday. He does now have a Germany football shirt, though, because the German Chancellor, Friedrich Merz, presented him with one at the G7 summit. It's got Trump 47 on the back of it.
Well, football unites the world. And that really is a turn up, because Merz really was critical of Trump, and Trump was critical of Merz not that long ago. So there you go, a World Cup bringing people together there.
Or is it bringing people together? Do we expect he'll have a shirt of all 48 countries? Well, maybe now there is the principle of a peace deal in play. Wouldn't be out of reach to imagine him with an Iran shirt, would it?
I think that might be pushing it slightly. Yeah, Iran has obviously been a huge issue through the build-up and into the tournament. And Tariq, you've been following them around Tijuana, Los Angeles, back to Tijuana again.
Yeah, starting in Antalya, Turkey, from a few weeks ago. Yeah, I feel like the Iran correspondent at the moment. Yeah, was in Tijuana with the team there just before they came to Los Angeles. Of course, they have to be in Mexico. They're not allowed to stay in the US. Must say they got a great reception there from the locals. There was a mariachi band serenading them on Saturday, and then a lot of Iranians had come over to support them as well outside the hotel gates. And it's a much more joyous atmosphere than they have here. So when they flew to Los Angeles the day before the game, they were met with some protests at the airport and also at their hotel from the Iranian diaspora here in Los Angeles, very much anti-regime. And it's very particularly pro the return of the monarchy, which is not in keeping with maybe all of the Iranian anti-regime sentiment. It seems very particular to LA. And the game itself was also kind of weird. There were Iranians with the monarchy or pre-revolutionary flag cheering for New Zealand with all their hearts. And there were obviously more Iranians supporting the national team. I've not been to a game that weird. And let's be honest, in a normal World Cup, Iran, New Zealand, with due respect to both teams, is not a massive World Cup match. But this thing felt very, very, very big.
And it did end 2-2. And Gianni Infantino went into the Iran dressing room afterwards. I wonder if he's expecting the video to be published of him talking to the players.
Yeah, he did. He went into the dressing room, spoke to them for 4 or 5 minutes about all their efforts and how FIFA are helping them and things like that. But I always think he's performing anyway. I think that's his normal way of speaking now. He's become FIFA President Gianni Infantino, bot 2.0. And even the way he was talking to them felt like he was knowing that there are cameras around, there was applause and things like that. However, afterwards, the comments from, mixed zones, you never expect that much, or a press conference, pretty benign. The comments from Mehdi Tarami, the captain, and the manager, Ali Ghossami, were pretty strong. The manager said Iran is the most oppressed team in the World Cup, and he might have a point, all the many things that have happened to them. And Tarimi basically said it's a total disaster what they faced. They was bemoaning the fact they had to leave immediately, no time for recovery, no time for rest. The fact that they should have been allowed to come 2 days before so they can acclimatize to the city and practice normally. They're saying, it's just completely unfair. And of course, Gianni Infantino, when we were all at that press conference in Mexico City at the start of the tournament, said no one could have got Iran at the World Cup apart from FIFA. And maybe he has a point, I don't know, but the Iranians certainly feel under siege and uncomfortable with what they're facing.
Yeah, he actually said no one apart from me could have done it, he said.
Sure.
But, I mean, it's quite common for teams to fly back immediately after a match. I think like the England team do it, for example. Is it that much of a hardship?
Well, they want to get back to their base as soon as possible to rest and be in their familiar surroundings, although it's not the base they wanted to be at in Tijuana. They wanted to be in Arizona. Could they have had a case at CAS if they'd gone that we're having to play in conditions that no other team is facing? Everyone else gets to go if they want 2 days before the match. We aren't.
Yeah, it's a good question. That one that I wonder if they were thinking about investigating. Although at the same time they're also really grateful to FIFA. Like, you get mixed words. FIFA are trying, FIFA are doing this, but they do feel oppressed in terms of flying after the game. It's not just flying as well. They have to go through immigration every time. And when they arrived in Los Angeles, they were delayed. And the press conferences before the game were delayed because what should be like a 45-minute flight involved the 45-minute flight, but then all sorts of questions and I guess little irritations at border control. And I don't think any other team has to face this. Don't forget, this is a football team above anything else at a World Cup. 26 players, 11 go on the pitch, same as everyone else. But the little, I guess, hardships and maybe some of these indignities, they do start to add up for this particular team.
In the press conferences, there was a suggestion they didn't want to talk politics, with the venue media officer intervening at one point on the day before the game. And yet it seemed when they're in the mix zone, directly in close contact, they were only too happy to talk about all the political problems that the Americans have caused for them in terms of being able to smoothly play these matches.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And to be honest, they weren't talking about politics in a bigger sense or America and Iran and all of this. They were talking about politics in the sense of how it has affected them. And that's what that press conference, and they were into it, to be honest. I was at both of these things. The venue media officer, who's a FIFA official, he said, no, only talk about the game. But obviously we didn't. And to be honest, they were quite happy to talk before the game about all of these issues. And after, I do think that made me wonder whether it was FIFA that tried to kind of direct the questions away from anything outside of the pitch. These guys, of course, wanted to have their say. And they did, both before and after the game. Although Mehdi Tarami said, this press conference, no one's asked about New Zealand and the game tomorrow, almost having a go at us. But how can you? Look at all this stuff that's going on. It would be really strange, if you see a massive pink elephant in the room and you start talking about the wallpaper, not the elephant. Like, it was obvious.
Yeah, I mean, I know there has been a peace deal now, but I mean, the fact that they were able to get to the World Cup is pretty remarkable, isn't it? I mean, imagine Russia and Ukraine won't even play anywhere each other anyway. I mean, you can't imagine one of them going to one of the other countries to play a football match. It just beggars belief. So the whole thing has been quite remarkable.
You've all been to games now. Before the start of the match, when they do the national anthems, you see these enormous giant flags of each team, right, being unfurled across half the length of the pitch. So it was quite striking to see the Islamic Republic of Iran's enormous flag being pulled across the turf there at SoFi Stadium in Los Angeles in this moment. And the anthem, of course, like for a lot of these Iranians, they're booing the anthem. And they arrived with the pre-revolutionary flag, which ostensibly was banned and prohibited by FIFA, but there were thousands of them, either on T-shirts, people holding them, face painted. It was quite a sight. And I guess of all the World Cups, for there not to be giant flags, this might have been one that probably could have done without it.
Yeah, that's. I did think that as well as I was watching that being unfurled.
Well, we should get back to the press conference that Gianni Infantino did. It's our first chance to speak about it on the pod since it took place. Notable because it was the first large-scale, all-in press conference Gianni Infantino has seemingly done since the start of the Women's World Cup in 2023. All three of us were there. Unfortunately, I was the only one to get a question. And we didn't really get that many direct answers to questions that were asked at the press conference. So this is what I asked.
We've heard you talk about how you need to raise money for football, also about how you want to focus on the football. Football needs fans. They bring the passion. You were once a fan growing up who couldn't afford tens of thousands of dollars for a ticket. Your friend Donald Trump said he wouldn't pay $1,000 for a ticket. The British Prime Minister Keir Starmer said it's unacceptable for fans to be exploited. Are Trump and Starmer wrong, or do you apologise to fans who feel ripped off and priced out, and will you look to ensure that prices do come down and never as high again?
So the answer went on for over 6 minutes and didn't really address the points directly. It was more justifying why ticket prices are high and going on to talk about TV rights and being free to air. Not every country in the world does actually have every World Cup match free to air.
France, half pay TV, half free to air. Mexico, where we are now. Mexico, where I've been and where we were. It's really hard to find the game on free TV. So, there were some massive claims there. You need, like, these days, this live fact-checking that we see sometimes in politics. That press conference could have done with absolutely a live fact-check as he was speaking. And those answers, my goodness.
Some of them you could turn into academic theses.
You certainly could. It was a bit frustrating, actually. I was glad you were able to ask a good question, Rob, and there were a couple of other good ones. I made that Tariq and I had been to the FIFA Congress in Rwanda, been to the FIFA Congress in Bangkok, been to the FIFA Congress in Asuncion in Paraguay, and now we come to this press conference, finally have an opportunity, and I felt like we were kind of ignored. And I did ask the question, do they want journalists to come to the FIFA Congress? Because are they encouraging them to? Because what are they doing to help journalists do that? And perhaps by showing that sort of that dedication to travelling to these far-flung places, we should be given an opportunity for a question when the opportunity arises. I think you and I both thought there's some quite important questions to ask about his relationship with Donald Trump, and specifically the complaint by the Norwegian Football Federation to the Ethics Committee about a breach of FIFA's political neutrality rules. I think that was that was a really important thing, but we didn't have the opportunity.
No.
This was the stage for Gianni Infantino to take on the big issues. He had lots of points to make, so if he'd continue taking questions, he could have got more of his points across. It was interesting, he brought up in the answer to me, out of nowhere, this sense about democracy and about one member, one vote, and needing to maintain that, and how you want to have democracies, and claiming it's not about trying to win votes, something I hadn't even asked in the question about making money.
No.
Yeah, it's obviously something we discuss on the podcast quite often, about how much is the use of FIFA funds something that keeps FAs on board and happy around the world.
It's called the Streisand effect. I think he drew attention to himself and that is effectively exactly what it is. It is historically pork barrel politics. You pay the voters in FIFA world, which is those grants, and they vote for you. And Gianni Infantino, by saying that is not what goes on, made us think, is that what does go on? Because no one asked him about that. He seemed to, as you said, just offer it up for no reason. Now, a lot's been written about how presidents get elected and how FIFA politics works, and nice of Gianni Infantino to remind us.
Yeah, I think I think he's feeling a little bit perhaps bruised. I mean, when he announced he was standing for re-election in Vancouver in April, there wasn't a sort of standing ovation, massive cheering. There was a sort of, I think, fairly muted response. And
from the media or the member associations?
I think there's maybe a little bit of cheering from the media. But no.
Well, some members of the media are actually part of promoting this World Cup. They actually run adverts for FIFA
Well,
and
indeed,
FIFA
they
sponsors.
do. Yes, indeed. Fabrizio Romano has been advertising a cryptocurrency deal that FIFA has done. But
Lay's, Airbnb, many more.
Many more.
Although we've just named the sponsors, so we've given them their attention.
I took care not to mention the cryptocurrency name.
We will not be paid for any of these endorsements. And of course, there are other crisps, cryptocurrencies, and sundry other items that you can purchase that aren't affiliated with FIFA or Fabrizio Romano.
Or Sport Unlocked.
Or Sport Unlocked.
No, but I do think he has been looking to his election next year and worrying slightly perhaps whether somebody might emerge from the shadows to challenge him, even if it's a kind of stalking horse who's got no chance of victory. But I think that's very unlikely that's going to happen. I think people will bide their time and hope that there is no move to change the FIFA's statutes and that he stands for again in 2031. I mean, I think certainly he's told friends and colleagues that that's not going to happen.
Well, going back to something we just talked about in the pod, maybe that's why this statement for those countries that attacked Alexander Shevrin, not that he wants to stand, I don't think, but just shows the jitteriness of the moment, maybe.
And this is a big moment for Gianni Infantino. With it being the biggest World Cup, he wants to set the narrative, it to go off without any sorts of problems. We are barely a week into this tournament, and it is the longest ever tournament. And ultimately, they'll be hoping that any of these issues at the start will be forgotten at the end, and everyone will be focused on full stadiums, and he'll be able to declare victory. In fact, he's already called it the greatest ever World Cup days in on his Instagram, Gianni Infantino.
Well, every World Cup is the best ever and will be forever. One interesting thing is the sheer distances that are involved for this World Cup. I mean, we're talking, I think Mexico to Vancouver is like 3,000 miles. But Gianni Infantino, he managed to get to every single match in Qatar because there were only, I think, stadiums are like 45 miles apart at most. He's actually trying to get to 2 matches a day using mostly a private jet.
Mostly?
Well, he has to get off the jet and use another form of transport to get into the stadium. They don't land at the stadiums.
Yeah, and maybe sometimes he might sometimes go by horse.
A golf buggy at the Aztec Stadium.
Yeah, well, golf buggy, exactly.
He did. He was driving the golf buggy at the Azteca Stadium after the press conference. Apparently, almost ran over our colleague from Israeli media, as he, our friend from Babagol.
Was he driving it himself?
He was driving it himself.
Wow.
He's getting his pilot's license as well, Ziggs.
But I think that's. I'm not what. And you see him, he's always on, I think the host broadcast service has sort of told that he has to appear on the big screen at every match that he's at. But what do you think is the sort of reasoning behind this? Is it a good idea? Maybe it is.
I mean, he needs to be going to matches. He is the FIFA president. I mean, he was called out for not attending about a week of the Women's World Cup in 2023.
Right. I have 2 answers for you here. One on why he should. Rob's done a bit of that. The other part is the politics of FIFA. You've got to be seen, I guess, with these federations to show that you are into them as the FIFA president. However, do you need to go 2 a day? Like, this kind of level of flying is insane. The environmental cost of just flying this guy around so he could sit in this box for a few... And he could still watch most of these teams without just going nuts in the way he does, right? But there is the politics, and there is the kind of FIFA presidential aura that is sprinkled on the tournament and the games and the teams when he is there, I guess, for some people. And then on the other hand as well, I think also there is pure vanity. And this is also a personal choice. It doesn't have to happen. Would we? Rob mentioned in New Zealand. In New Zealand, he just left the country. He just didn't stay. No one was saying, "Oh, you need to go to every game." He just left. Now, let me ask you: would people be exorcised if Gianni Infantino was not going to 2 games a day? Of course they won't. So why is he doing it?
Well, the people who might want to see him are the FAs who are at the matches. For them, the chance to spend some time with Gianni Infantino when their teams are playing. But
wait.
Here's the thing. Look at Gianni Infantino's Instagram account. Something very notable over the first week. And we saw it particularly in Los Angeles when the Americans played Paraguay. And a load of celebrities in the stadium. Katy Perry, Tom Cruise, Hilary Duff. The list was vast and the big screen kept on showing them. And his Instagram afterwards showed him with all of these celebrities who were there. It was a whole scroll through of them. And we've not seen him yet at this World Cup a week in, pictured with any regular football fans. Say it sometimes. It's what the royal family do in Britain. They make sure they're seen with normal, regular people, even if they are the aristocracy, the elite. You go and see them at a particular location.
Yeah.
To have a brief chat.
When was the last time you saw Insta Gianni comments off with a normal person? Pictured with it. When was the last time, not in just walking about among people in a way that was accessible? It's very, very rare that unless it's a staged managed situation. I can't think of one. Even when we were in Rwanda for the FIFA Congress, there were kind of invited children that were kind of running around. But nothing spontaneous, nothing close to the people, and it just feels extremely elite.
He has been seen with one regular fan, if you can call I Show Speed that. Particular favourite.
Yes, a regular fan indeed. Yes, lots of influencers. I did encounter Gianni Infantino at the, or see him arrive anyway, at the National Association Summit in Miami at a beachfront hotel. Comes up with quite a cortege of police escorts, flashing lights, sirens. It's pretty full-on stuff. And so he did sort of meet all the national associations there, and he'd actually met them in Mexico City, and then FIFA chartered lots of flights to fly them on to Miami for this summit. So I guess the people he's going to be seeing at the matches are all people he's already seen.
Well, that's the politics of FIFA. I've done some reporting on what the administration is doing, and one of their units that's set up in Miami to be monitoring social media abuse during this World Cup. And they do have extensive operations there, monitoring all team or player accounts, intervening during matches, trying to get the stuff taken down, trying to pursue cases. It's done with the company Signify. So this is something away from all the politics at the top, where it didn't exist a few years ago, that they are taking on the racist abuse, discriminatory abuse that they are seeing online.
And again, it's going to be another tournament where we're going to get this stuff. However, I think over the last few years, these organizations have got better at knowing what's happening and are trying to combat this stuff. However, it's incessant, isn't it? Most of it's going to still get through.
And we don't hear at all from the likes of Meta or X talking publicly. They put it on blog posts online, but they don't address the issue head on. And it means every tournament now we're talking about it, and you're watching matches fearing there'll be some abuse, particularly of a black player, if an incident happens in a game.
Because they don't care that much. It doesn't hurt their bottom line.
And when I say incident, that's anything as much as a missed shot, which is not their fault.
Yeah, but these platforms really don't give a damn. And we've learned that, because if they wanted to, they could. They're worth billions and billions of dollars, but this stuff is expensive. It's not harming their bottom line to have this stuff on. Sometimes I think, engagement is engagement, and that they really don't care, to be honest with you.
Yeah, important topic to look into there, Rob, and something that comes up very unfortunately so regularly at these major tournaments.
And something else that comes often at major tournaments is us being in a rush. Guys, I'm going to have to go because I've got to run across the border to Tijuana in Mexico again.
Back the other way. Well, I hope you find your way to the stadium okay, because one thing that is so confusing for so many at this World Cup is those familiar stadiums have completely different names. In fact, when we were at the Azteca Stadium, it's actually called the Mexico City Stadium, not the famous name. The SoFi Stadium in California is the Los Angeles Stadium. It is sort of illogical because it means people don't understand where they really are if they're familiar with that venue. And also, they're really boring names. Here's one thing. If you're going to change the name, why not name it after some sort of good cause, promote some sort of initiative at the very least, and that would have a more lasting impact.
The Sport Unlocked Stadium in New York, New Jersey.
I think they should all be called the Gianni Infantino Unites the World Football Stadium. Name your city.
See if that one catches on. We'll send your suggestions at Sport Unlocked on social media, sportunlockpod@gmail.com. But great to do this episode from right the way across the United States.
Right, guys, safe travels.
Well.
And thank you everyone for listening. Goodbye for now.